Every time you lose, you die a little bit. You die inside, a portion of you. Not all of your organs, maybe just your liver.
Pain is inevitable.
They're killing me, Whitey. They're killing me.
There was only the painful face of failure.
Okay, fellas? Hey, fellas, this is what you work all off season for. This is why you lift all them weights. This is why you do all that.
There was a fighting heart under the ribs of defeat.
Never give up, baby. Never give up.
Hey, because football season never ends. This is Intentional Grounding with your host, Pat Grotheer, on Brookdale Student Radio, 90.5 The Night. Check it out.
How we doing, everybody? Welcome back here to another week at Intentional Grounding. Glad to be back. As always, we will start off here with a couple things couldn't really fit into the show. Maybe just didn't have the spot for it or just popped up like this one. Cowboys running back. Hold on, let me get it up. Joseph Randle, their backup behind DeMarco Murray. He was arrested for shoplifting at a mall on Monday night, charged with a misdemeanor Class B theft of $50 to $500, according to the Frisco, Texas police. He was released on bond at 1:20 a.m. early this morning. He said he was accused, the lieutenant there, said he was accused of attempting to steal underwear and cologne. So, I mean, I didn't have a most ridiculous story for this week, but, I mean, that I guess that'll take the cake. We'll do that a little early. I mean, the guy, 5th-round draft pick, so granted he's not making, big bucks, but he's got a base salary of almost $500,000. So when we'll say roughly divide it by the 16 games of his game checks, the guy's making about $30,000 a game. That's not a bad salary. He's not had a bad season this year. 113 yards, 16 carries. He's behind DeMarco Murray, so it's a hard act to follow. Plus, you got Lance Dunbar there, who also gets a share of the carries. He had a season-high 52 yards against Seattle in the win this past Sunday. So, I mean, the guy coming in stealing some underwear and some cologne, is he going to be the next guy on one of those broke specials? Because I really don't. I don't get the thought process behind that, but Brian Hoyer here is hoping to win over LeBron. LeBron, of course, NBA star, returning back to Cleveland, where he started his career after going and winning a couple championships in Miami. He's understanding why he might support the Cowboys after posting up a photo on Instagram saying, when the caption was, "When someone say, 'Man, your Cowboys stink,' I say, 'Yeah, now I know we do,' sitting at 5-1. So LeBron is, much like the fans of Miami at the time, we could see LeBron being a bit of a bandwagoner in a sense. But I know he gave love to the Browns and all. It's his hometown team. It's when people aren't a fan of their hometown team, there should be a really good reasoning behind it. Like, oh, my dad grew up in Dallas, and then we moved here, and this and that. But I want to hear his reasoning behind being a Cowboys fan, besides just being, Des Bryant's friend or whatever his reasoning will be. So we will get into 5 and Out. As always, the top 5 NFL headlines of the week. So we'll start off here. This one was a little surprising when I saw it. Given how, a decent year for him so far. 403 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 receiving, 1 rushing, with a 4.3 average. He's 6th overall, Frank Gore. You wouldn't think that he was told last year that he might not even be a 49er this year. Basically, I mean, it makes sense, though. You really can't kind of doubt it, given his age, 31 years old, his salary incentives, over $6 million, and the 49ers draft pick in Carlos Hyde, who's eventually and slowly kind of solidifying himself as his apparent replacement in the very near future. Of course, Niners general manager Trent Baalke said there's no truth to this report put out by Ian Rappaport, who's an NFL Network insider, I guess you could say. Say that, that nobody approached him and said that his roster spot was in jeopardy. I mean, you kind of need him now. I mean, LaMichael James asked for his release. Marcus Lattimore was on the team's non-football injury list. Hyde is pretty good. 34 carries, 132 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the season, but I don't think he's an every down type guy like Frank Gore is. But, I mean, it's good to have him now training behind a very solid running back, a guy who would always pull up great numbers, and he's just always really a solid guy. He has his off years like everybody, but he's always a solid guy. Next up here, I mean, there's always one Donovan McNabb and countless of his teammates in 2008. Now it's Kelvin Benjamin makes the usual headline whenever a tie game happens in the NFL. I didn't know you could tie in the NFL. Those were his words. He had no idea, as a lot of players do. I remember they did a polling on that the last time around. I tried to find it, but I couldn't. What percentage of players didn't know you could tie, and then they also went into other, ridiculous rules that a lot of people don't even know exist. But it was pretty funny seeing that. It's not. You're always going to get the one guy. Is always going to be the one guy. So Kelvin Benjamin was that guy this week. Next up here, we have the Bills introducing their new owners, Terry and Kim Pagula, officially owners of the Buffalo Bills. $1.4 billion was the price tag. The group plans to keep the team in Buffalo as expected because he is the owner of the Buffalo's NHL counterpart, the Sabres. So that was kind of really the best possible option for Buffalo to have take over. A guy who really already loves the town by owning another professional sports team in the area, and he's definitely keeping them there. A lot of people are bringing up the stadium, but there's no rush at all. I mean, they're the first year into the lease of a 10-year, $231 million lease on the stadium named after their late former owner, Ralph Wilson. No rush there. I couldn't see them trying to build a new one for some time. There were talks of Bon Jovi being in one of the bidders in the ownership group. There was also talks of moving it to Toronto or possibly one of the teams that are going to be moving to L.A. Because the mayor, I believe it was L.A., was saying that there's going to be a team in Los Angeles by the end of 2015. So that's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. St. Louis is a team that used to play in Los Angeles, and they're weren't satisfied last year with the terms of their lease getting towards the end of it because they wouldn't give them any money they wouldn't kind of match their money on upgrading the stadium and renovating it at the Edward Jones Dome. So, speaking of St. Louis Rams, Greg Robinson, their first-round pick coming out of the draft this year, left guard, finally makes his first start. It wasn't disciplinary. It wasn't anything bad. Some guys just don't really kind of acclimate to the NFL speed immediately. It takes him a little bit, and that was the case with Greg Robinson. But he came in last night, and I didn't get to see much of him because I wasn't aware of that until today. I missed some of the game too. Looking at the comments of some of these articles where you'll see Rams fans and other fans. Most of the time it's all garbage, but you usually get to see the true colors of some fans, and it was kind of 50-50. Some people were really happy that Davin Joseph, he was struggling, really struggling. The guy who was at the right guard, at the left guard, and then they moved somebody over, and then put in Greg Robinson last night. It wasn't that far off of a game yesterday. I don't know. I didn't get to see the rushing stats at all, so I'm not sure how much, because that's what he mainly was. He wasn't very known as he wasn't known very much as a pass blocking type of guy. He was more of a great run backer coming out of Auburn. He would just blow defensive linemen off the ball. So that was really his strong point. And when you looked at the stat line last night, it was kind of interesting to see that, they only really had 40 yards rushing. That was their leading rusher on the team. So, of course, it's his first game, and you're not expecting this guy to go off and really do really, really well. It was 93 yards total. You had Zach Stacy in there a little bit. Tavon Austin had probably a few of those little, jet sweep type deals. And then I believe they had Cunningham. That's the other back that's over there too. So total rushing wasn't bad, but they didn't have that one standout guy that really could have pounded between the tackles and did well for him. Last up here, we have, and this just got a little bit more of a development too. Greg Olsen, Carolina Panthers tight end. He's calling for Cincinnati's linebacker, Vontaze Burfict, who was, I think, leading tackler last year. Guy's a really, really hard-nosed player. He's calling for his head. He wants the NFL to suspend him for, maliciously taking down him, Cam Newton on their respective touchdowns. He accused him of basically like twisting their ankles when he was taking them down. He headhunted Kelvin Benjamin and saying he's been fined a lot for in the past. So now, the bans really need to start to come into play to really, truly make him realize, what he's doing. And now the NFL is going to review it. So it's good to see that they're, being, I guess he really kind of, Greg Olson really kind of put him on blast a little bit in the media, and, they listen and they're going to take a look at it. Marv Lewis kind of just laughed it off, head coach of the Bengals, saying, he didn't really see it, and he kind of compared it to, wrestling movies. Like, what are we in the WWF with the whole ankle twisting thing? So he didn't really see anything. I was trying to find tape on it, but I couldn't. You look at all these videos and the express written consent of the NFL and all that, but I couldn't really find one that showed those specific tackles. But I'm sure if you turn on SportsCenter, now that this is becoming more of a story, you'll absolutely see the videos within the next day, probably right now if you were to turn on one of the channels. Yeah, that's it for 5 and Out. We will get into this week in review. So we had the Thursday night game, and Houston almost got them. They were very, very close. They kept it a lot closer than I thought it was going to be. Indy only beat them 33-28, and it was coming down to the wire towards the end. Some of the local games, we had Denver beating the Jets 31-17, in a game that really wasn't that far off for the Jets. The defense was really getting to Peyton in the first half. Mo Wilkerson got a sack, but it was constant pressure, and even when he got rid of the ball, he was still getting hit. It really came down towards the end with that Eric Decker call, which was horrible. I mean, you saw the one toe drag, and then the second one, the first toe tap, and then the second one dragged a little bit. You saw the pellets fly up from the turf. You can't blame the whole game on one play. I'm a firm believer in that, but that was a big play right there. That was getting the first down and keeping the drive going, and the Jets are, ever since Rex has been there, very emotional team. So things like that, they seem to always take to heart more. Like, the polar opposite. So something really good happens, bam, their confidence is up. But when something, gut punching happens like that, they get themselves out of the game. It's just their mentality for whatever reason. New England beat Buffalo 37-22, and then Pittsburgh lost to Cleveland 31-10, and then the old Sunday night debacle, that one was rough for the Giants, 27-0. Philly went all blacked out uniforms. They had that cartoon of Eli Manning that they made with his shirt over his head and his underwear pulled up, giving him a wedgie, and all the ghosts of the Eagles haunting him. It was kind of funny. It was good for a chuckle, but man, I mean, it was bad. Victor Cruz went down in that game. We'll talk about that a little later. It was really rough to see that. All the best to him in his recovery. Hopefully the reports coming out saying it's career ending aren't true, but that'll come up later on in the main talk because we got a lot of injuries. Stick around for that. The other blowout was Baltimore beating up on Tampa Bay, and Joe Flacco, 5 touchdowns in the first half nonetheless. I mean, he didn't get any towards the end, but 5 touchdowns, man. 48-17 was the final of that. And then, of course, like I said before, we got our tie, 37-37 overtime tie. Both teams wound up getting a field goal, and it was kind of weird towards the end because he didn't see Ron Rivera live up to that ridiculous nickname that he got last year when he was constantly going for it on fourth down, the old riverboat gambler Ron. So he didn't really want to go for it when they kicked the field goal, which was interesting to see. He was trying to play conservative and trust in his defense that they could, get a quick turnaround and then get back down and maybe get another field goal to end it. Of course, being with the new overtime rules, you can win on your first possession, but it has to be a touchdown. You can't get a field goal and then that's it. So it gives each team a chance on the field as long as that first team doesn't score the touchdown. That's always going to win it first off. So we'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We got talk about the old Herschel Walker trade. The anniversary was just this past Wednesday. If the show was on Wednesdays, we would have talked about it, but I didn't want to talk about it a day early. Interesting. Such an interesting read, looking at all the different articles and different points of views. And then it was kind of polluting hearing Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones go back and forth of, who is the mastermind behind it and all that. We'll get into it in just a few minutes. But I was feeling a little bit of a little Sam Spence mood. So we got, Off the Power and the Glory, one of my favorite NFL film songs. So enjoy it. We'll be back in about 2 minutes. love it. Sam Spence, man, did all the music for NFL films. You see all the great old tapes, and they even put him in some of the new ones too, which I still love to see that they're doing it. With Steve Sable, his father, doing all the stuff in NFL films. You know, the voice of God, John Facenda, a guy who, I mean, he's arguably the best voice ever. But just wait a few years, and I'll wind up surpassing him. But we got games to watch coming up, so some good games this week. The bye weeks, we got Philly and Tampa Bay on the bye this week, so adjust your fantasy lineup accordingly with LaShawn McCoy out. A lot of people are putting in Jeremy Maclin. Quarterback Nick Foles, of course, is always not a bad start. Tampa Bay, you got Vincent Jackson, who's kind of hot and cold some weeks. Lewis Murphy is starting to come in, so that's always nice to see, too. I got him real cheap in FanDuel. I don't know if any of you guys have tried that. It's a pretty cool little thing. It's a nice little change of pace from the usual fantasy. You just wind up hating your team halfway through the season, but you get to pick a new one every week, so that's kind of cool. Thursday night game is going to be... I'm not going to say definitely going to be. It has a good chance of being ugly. We have the 1-5 Jets going into Gillette to face the 4-2 Patriots. Tom Brady's on a roll. He's shutting everybody up from the beginning of the season, and he's doing pretty well again. I mean, the Buffalo one was a close one, but honestly, with Kyle Orton behind center at Buffalo, it's not a terrible, terrible team. It's really not that bad. I think they're leading the AFC East right now because they got the one up on the division game because they beat the Dolphins, and then the Patriots lost to the Dolphins, I believe it was. I can't remember exactly what those were, but Bills are 1-0 in the division, and they're tied with the Patriots, so they got that edge. It's surprising. I mean, of course, I think I talked about the stat a couple weeks ago when the Bills were still undefeated when they were 2-0. Whenever the Bills start off really well, they always wind up ending really bad. A couple of local games. We have Buffalo at home against Minnesota. And then Giants heading over to Dallas. Giants are 3-3. Dallas 5-1. I'm telling you, if I was doing power rankings this week, I would have had a long, hard think on, is Dallas really the number one team in the NFL right now? And they're really shaping up to be. They're doing very well. They just took down the Seahawks. So, that's bumping up a lot of spots in my book. And it's not, the usual, they're just, doing well and then they're going to end up 8-8. No, they're doing pretty good. They're going to give Philly a run for their money in this division. And then we have Houston going over to Pittsburgh on Monday night. Both teams are 3-3. One of the best games of the week, I think, is going to be San Francisco and Denver. That's going to be a great one. That's going to be on Sunday night. San Francisco 4-2, Broncos 4-1. They had the bye early, so that's the mismatch in the records. It's always a good game between them. Also, the Giants and Dallas game is going to be really good, too. You got to see how Odell Beckham, now being the rookie wide receiver there, is going to step up in wake of Victor Cruz going down. I think he's a good sleeper pickup in fantasy if you need a bye week guy or somebody to throw in your flex because your other guys maybe don't have great of matchups. I don't know about this matchup. It's going to be a tough one. He's really going to want to try to prove himself here. But I think nonetheless, he's still a very good pickup. Bengals and Colts is going to be a good one. I would say definitely that's a good one to watch in the 1 o'clock games too. A couple weird matchups this week. Not really thrilling games. You got Browns and Jaguars, Vikings and Bills, Titans and Redskins. So nothing really stellar. I think the Saints got to prove themselves going up against the Lions. Both teams have kind of a banged-up receiving and secondary core, respectively, on their offense and defense. So Calvin Johnson looks like he might be out. And then with the Saints, you had Jarius Byrd go out for the year. And Kenny Vaccaro's not having as stellar of a year, like headline of a year, as he did last year. And then we got Dolphins and Bears as well. Jay Cutler, I saw the headline. I didn't get to read the article. I'm going to read it, and I'll try to post them up later if I remember. Jay Cutler is the Herschel Walker of quarterbacks in that whole trade thing. It's I really want to read it. I'm very interested in seeing what that whoever wrote it had to say. I'll try to post it up too and see exactly what it said. So we'll get into that. Speaking of Herschel Walker, so the trade was this past Wednesday, so it was a week ago from tomorrow. But of course, shows on Tuesdays. The infamous Herschel Walker trade. It was the largest trade in NFL history. So what the Vikings received for, we'll get into that first. What everything was received, what people gave up, everything like that. So the Minnesota Vikings got Herschel Walker. This is all between the Vikings and the Cowboys, with one little instance with the Chargers. The Vikings got Herschel Walker, Dallas's third-round pick and 10th-round pick in 1990, and then their third-round pick the following year in 1991. And that was really their third-round pick the following year was really the only guy worth noting. It was Jake Reed, and even he wasn't, an All-Pro or a Pro Bowl guy. He was really a journeyman. He didn't spend more than 2-3 years on a team. And then the Cowboys received a slew of players and draft picks. So they got linebacker Jesse Solomon, David Howard, cornerback Isaac Holt, running back Darren Nelson, who actually refused to report to camp, and he was traded to San Diego. So in that case, Vikings received San Diego's 5th-round pick in 1990. Defensive end Alex Stewart was the last player involved in the draft. So you got 5 players. But the draft picks is what was very impressive. So they received the Vikings 1st, 2nd, and 6th in 1990. And then they got their 1st and 2nd in 91. And then the 2nd and 3rd in 92. And then the 1st pick in 93. See, now the only ones that weren't all conditional. So the first ones, what I said, all the ones in 1990. So the 1st, the 2nd, and the 6th. Those were all in the trade. You saw that. What Jimmy Johnson really did, and nobody realized it at face value, almost everybody, besides I believe it was one beat reporter at the time in Dallas, was cursing Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones at this trade, saying they got hosed, they gave up a whole lot of fire and Herschel Walker, and all they got in return was smoke from Minnesota. That could be this or that. But Jerry Jones is playing the long con. I'm sorry, not Jimmy Johnson. I firmly believe, after reading a lot and seeing everything, that I think the mastermind behind this was Jimmy Johnson. I think Jimmy Johnson was really playing the long con in this, because attached to all these players was a lot of conditional picks. So what Jimmy was doing was, even though they were 0-5 at the time, that's really the main reason why. And what the story goes as that every morning, Jimmy Johnson, his offensive coordinator, defense coordinator, some of the assistant coaches will go on a little jog around the facility. And this particular jog is what kind of sparked the trade. 0-5, you got nothing to lose. He said, you know what, why don't we trade Herschel? And they did, and it happened like within a couple of days after that talk. But what all the draft picks were, it was a lot of conditional picks. So if this guy didn't play to this point, or if he got cut before this point, they would get a better draft pick. So Jimmy Johnson was literally sitting all of these guys, and one of his assistants was talking to him and saying, Jimmy, we got to play these guys. They're better than what we have out on the field. He's like, I'm not worried about the players. I'm worried about the draft picks. And what these draft picks turned into was amazing. You had, of course, the big one was Emmitt Smith. He came out of one of the regular picks. It was the 1st-round pick in 1990. Emmitt Smith, now the leading NFL rusher. You had defensive tackle Russell Maryland, 10-year veteran, Pro Bowler. He came out of the... I don't remember which pick that was. It's slipping my mind. And then we also had cornerback Kevin Smith, safety Darren Woodson. So, a lot of big names there. Also, some of the other names, Dixon Edwards, Alvin Harper, Alexander Wright. A lot of guys that really came out of it and helped cement that legacy of how good Dallas was at the time. And then the whole debacle of the owner and the coach button heads. Jerry Johnson always wants too much power. Jimmy Johnson probably didn't want Jerry Jones to be everything, to be judge, jury, and executioner there. He's the GM and the owner and the president and everything. Way too much power for one man to have. And they kind of butted heads too much. And if it wasn't for that, if they could have kept their cool and gotten along and Jimmy Johnson remained the head coach, they were on pace to win 5 championships. They really could have won that many. They really would have been just probably one of the greatest dynasties to go down in professional football. And it would have been amazing looking back at that now. I, of course, wouldn't have seen it. I would have been, not born and then only alive for a couple of years. But it would have been amazing to look back and see what they really would have become. Even just thinking of great dynasties that could have become Cleveland in 95 when Bill Belichick was there, but then, the team got moved out in the middle of the night, and all the coaches and front office guys that came from that was amazing too. But I mean, some of these owners just don't know, are looking at, more money side of it, or have too big of egos, or whatever the case may be, than what's really best for the team. So I mean, what could have happened if Jimmy Johnson stayed there? It's amazing to think about. We'll get into the main talk here. So got a lot of injuries, and it's not no-name guys. You got big name guys. First one up is Calvin Johnson. So, I mean, he might not come back till week 10. He could. They got the bye coming up in week 9, but it was really bugging him, and we talked about it last week. Him being in that decoy role, and that could really get to anybody, And they're finally. They sat him last week, this past Sunday, and they could be out till week 10. That would be against Miami at home. So, I mean, this is really going to affect a lot of people's fantasy teams too, because not only is it affecting having Calvin Johnson on your team, but when you have Golden Tate on your team, granted, he's going to do decent against some of the teams with not as great secondaries, but having that decoy there and Calvin Johnson drew away double coverage from him. That's why Golden Tate was going off. So he's not as valuable as he once was, unless they have a really, really good matchup. So you got to look at that too. Bruce Arians, this one really kind of bugged me because it came out of nowhere. The 4 o'clock games came around, and I turned the game on, and Carson Palmer's on the field. And me and my dad look at each other. What happened? It was supposed to be, Drew Stanton was questionable with the concussion. It was supposed to be this no-name rookie who was supposed to start. But out of nowhere, Carson Palmer comes in. I mean, good for him. He's healthy. He's back in the game. But, I mean, it just literally felt like kickoff came, and it was like, all right, Carson, suit up. You're good to go. But he's back now. I'm hoping that this nerve issue in his shoulder doesn't keep really bugging him all season. We also have Darren Sproles. I believe it was a sprain on his MCL. Likely to miss at least one game, possibly a few more, depending on how the rehabbing goes and everything like that. Alex Mack, who is the center for the Cleveland Browns, expected to miss most of the year. Mike Pettin feels pretty optimistic about it. He broke his fibula. So, I mean, they got John Greco, who's their starting right guard. He's going to take over at center, which he did last year and did not a bad job. And then they're going to have Paul McQuiston sliding over into that guard spot. But, I mean, it's hard to really replace Alex Mack. He's really up there with Mangold and a lot of the best centers in the league right now. A.J. Green, of course, was out last week, and there's a chance that he's going to miss another week for the Bengals. He's already saying, day after the game that it's not looking good, and they may think about surgery. And it's so hard because I love A.J. Green. Whenever I play fantasy, I always look for A.J. Green, and of course I have him this year. So he's going to be seeing some time on the bench being injured, but valued pickups in his place, Mohamed Sanu. I wish I would have gotten him last week in regular fantasy, but in FanDuel that would have been a huge up into the money. He had 10 receptions, 120 yards, and a touchdown. So I would look at Mohamed Sanu if you need somebody to replace Megatron or A.J. Green or Victor Cruz. Speaking of Victor Cruz, torn patellar tendon was the official diagnosis after Sunday night. It was really hard to watch, seeing the I didn't see it when it happened live. I was stepping away from the TV, but I saw the replays after. And man, he was visibly shaken up. It must have really, really been a lot of pain. And not only a lot of pain, but it just sucks, really getting out this early into the season. And I mean, a lot of people are saying it's career ending. I don't know if it's that bad. I'm not a doctor in any sense. I don't claim to be at all. I don't know how far these injuries can go, but I mean, you see a guy like Reggie Wayne, who's a little bit older of a guy, coming back from it. Of course, it's common now. They know how to do it. The ACL tears, but and this is a completely different injury. But I mean, with the advances in medicine and these amazing doctors, Dr. James Andrews, who does like every single major NFL surgery, or anybody in his group really does. I don't see why this guy can't get back. If not maybe early next year, mid-season, if they really want to kind of take it slow and not rush him back into it. All the best to him, and really hope he can get back. But I think Odell Beckham's really going to have to step up. And I believe he will. I think he's also a viable pickup if you need somebody. Noshawn Moreno out for the season. So he injured at ACL. They put him on IR, season ender. He is not designated to return. He only played in 3 games this year, 148 yards on 31 carries. Lamar Miller is the starter there now, and now he's going to have an even bigger load to carry. Tough to see, the hometown guy go out, even though he's on the Dolphins, and, I always talk as much crap about the Dolphins as I humanly can. You never want to see anybody go out like that. Patrick Willis, see what I'm talking about? Like, this is a lot of big name guys right now. These aren't your, no name people that are getting injured. This is going to really hurt a lot of teams and a lot of players. This is going to be rough. Patrick Willis now, linebacker, of course, in the 49ers. He's going to have an MRI today on his toe. Heard it in Monday night's win against the Rams. Left the locker room wearing a boot, and he said X-rays were taken, but he's not sure of the severity of it. We'll probably get an update sometime today once they have their press conference. West Coast time, they're a couple hours behind us, so you'll probably hear something around 3-4ish on what the prognosis is on that. New England took a big blow on both sides of the ball. Gerard Mayo out for the year, and Stevan Ridley out for the year. And it's MCL and ACL for Ridley, so he got the double hit, and then Mayo got hit on his right knee. I don't think they have a full diagnosis on that yet, but a lot of other players they have hurt. Dan Connolly, their lineman, with a concussion, a couple special teamers, and then a few more linemen, a couple rookies that are hurt as well, and then you got some guys that were not enough to get out of a game, but it's still an injury that'll nag him. Tom Brady, Brandon Browner, Dominique Easley, Donta Hightower, Chandler Jones, McCourty. They're still playing, but those injuries, if you get hit the wrong way, something could happen. You never know, and then they could be out. And then lastly here that was the last one. I just saw this. This was going to be one of the most ridiculous ones. I'll say just because it's up and it's in front of my face, and it was stupid. Colin Kaepernick. If you saw this, he was fined $10,000. So the NFL's fashion police strikes again. Colin Kaepernick being sponsored by the Beats by Dre headphones, and now NFL's agreement with Bose, as you've seen them proudly wearing on the sidelines and the commercials during the games. Colin Kaepernick wearing some pink Beats and got fined $10,000 by Roger Goodell. And he's still wearing them. Because you want to know what? Beats is going to pay all those fines so he can keep wearing them. And they're not going to care at all, and neither is he. That's what we'll cut it off this week. We'll bring back power rankings probably next week. I'll be able to throw some of those together. I'll take into account this week and what happens this coming Sunday. But take a look at some of the games I was talking about. The Sunday night game is going to be great. San Francisco and Denver. That's always a good matchup. Those are always two, possible Super Bowl contenders. So, expect a great game there. But we'll be back next week, same time. So enjoy the week and pray for the Jets on Thursday. Thank you.